Hey John, how's it going?
Hey, it's going all right. Good to be with everybody. How you doing?
Pretty good. How you been?
Uh, one day at a time. I mean, I think like everybody, it's the worst thing I have to worry about is keeping myself entertained. I can survive, but it's been a year for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. I think the last time we probably both played a show was back in February, or have you played any shows since then?
I've done a couple of like Zoom things, not quite like this, but nothing extensive. And I also haven't felt great about playing live. There's been opportunities here and there, but with the virus, I just think it's important that we show solidarity and just live shows will be back at some point. But until then, I'm content with doing these Zoom things and writing. But what about you?
I'm just suffering through allergies right now, as you can see. This is real life, people. This is not going to be some pretty polished interview. Um, just a couple friends talking. What I've been doing is, yeah, I haven't played a show since those shows with you and Jason in February in Asheville and Knoxville. Um, I'm not gonna talk shit about other people, but I absolutely would not put anybody who would come out to one of my shows at risk and kind of expect them to come out at a show. Especially now, things are getting worse. Um, yeah, it's just it's not worth it. Not worth it, folks.
Yeah,
Don't do it.
that's how I feel about it. I mean, I think everybody's got to kind of do their own thing, and everyone is an adult that's making their own choice if they're playing or if they're attending.
But we can shame people a little bit, right?
Well, my thing would be it's a serious situation, and I think we need to ask ourselves the question of is this show really worth the risk involved?
It is worth asking that question. I mean, how would you feel if someone caught the virus and passed away at one of your shows?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I don't
would.
know.
It's inconceivable, and I know that there's a reality for different performers. There's people who are trying to pay the bills, but I also am grateful that I've been in a situation where I've been able to say no when those opportunities have arisen. For that, for exactly the reason you're pointing out, it's not worth the risk. I want people to come to the shows. I want to be playing for people, but there's going to come a time when it's safe to do that again, and I can hold out until then.
Absolutely. Have you acquired any new interesting skills during this pandemic?
Um, I mean, I would say what's been interesting for me is that I've found a way to be creative that isn't songwriting, and that's been fiction writing. So I've really gotten into sort of writing short stories and working on a novel, and then also doing sort of the journalist thing,
Hmm.
which has been cool because it's been a creative outlet that doesn't have a ton of pressure. Like if I write a novel and it's crap and no one ever reads it, that's okay. It's fun. Um, but yeah, I agree with you. It's been one of the blessings of this craziness has been the space to experiment. And what about you? What you been up to?
I have gotten into uh, just learning more about nature and doing some foraging and identifying plants and things like that, and edible berries and fruits and all kinds of stuff like that, and mushrooms. So yeah,
That's
just
awesome.
just kind of exploring that, um, and doing some songwriting as well. Fiction writing, that sounds really cool. That's something that I've messed around with a little bit. Um, I I want to get better at it. I suck at writing short stories because I don't know how to like end things. They just go on and on and on. Maybe that's just how you read a novel. I don't know.
Well, I certainly don't have it figured out, but I was actually reading, or I guess listening to the audiobook of Jeff Tweedy's new How to Write One Song.
Hmm.
And one of the things he says is like, a piece of art never has an endpoint. It can just be abandoned in an interesting place. And that was kind of inspiring to me in that way. Like it goes against sort of the perfectionist tendencies that I think a lot of us have. You know,
Mhm.
that there
Mhm.
really is no perfect, there's not going to be a perfect ending, but there is a way that you can tell the story and leave it in a satisfying place. So that's what I've been trying to implement. Not with much success, but it's been fun to try, you know.
For sure. I was gonna jump more into like songwriting a little bit later, but that kind of reminded me of something. And I heard a quote one time. I forget who it was by, but they kind of described songwriting or writing in general as um, driving at night with like one headlight on a really foggy night, and you can just barely see what's ahead, but you can't see too far ahead. And that's kind of the and not everybody writes that way, because I recently had a co-write, which was the first co-write I've ever done, which is kind of surprising for Nashville. But I had a co-write where the guy was very structured, so it was very interesting for me, um, because I'm not a structured person when it comes to songwriting. I definitely write that way, where I can't see too far ahead. And that's part of the excitement of writing for me, is that it's kind of revealed to me as well. It's like I don't know what's going to happen next, especially if I'm writing like a story song. How is it for you with writing? Do you kind of go in with a plan, or do you kind of write the song and then um, listen to it after, or like when you're three-fourths of the way through writing it, you're like, oh, that's what this is about?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good question. And I think the easy cop out is to say every song's going to be different, right? But
Right.
I would say that my best songs and the ones that I'm most proud of are the ones like you described, where I go back and it's almost like it doesn't feel like you wrote it at all,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like, wow, you know, the creative process was sort of just coming through. And I'm as excited and surprised by the end result as I think the audience would be. But there's other instances where, like Resurrection Mary, that tune, like it's based on an actual ghost story trope, and so there certainly was some structure going in, saying, this is the story I'm trying to tell. So I'm going to work around more of a structured framework, but I'm still going to sort of be creative and let it kind of tell my story in addition to telling this structured place. But I think ultimately it's the balancing act that we're all trying to do, which is, here's craft, here's technique, here's tradition. How can we take that to build the foundation without ending up with something that's contrived and not creative at all? How do I be creative and experimental and be myself while maybe using craft or using structure? And it just looks different on every tune. It's interesting you would say that, because in fiction, there's like two basic schools of thought in how you tell a story, and it's either pantsing it or it's outlining, which is kind of what you're saying. So, like, pantsing it are the writers who go in and say, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to write this scene. I'm going to write this character and let that character take me where it's going to go. And then there's sort of the outline people who sit down and say, this is the story. These are the major plot points. And, there's pros and cons to each method. But for me, I've always been more of a kind of pants it, because I feel like when I go into it too structured and go into it, knowing where it's going to go, it's hard to make it feel genuine and not feel kind of forced. Like, this is where I knew it was going to go. And so my decisions, you know, weren't creative, they were craft, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think kind of when you structure it too much, structuring something and setting a timeline for yourself almost kind of go hand in hand. You're like, this is okay, I need to have some conflict here, and I need to have some resolution here. And then, oh, we had the bridge here to just introduce a little bit more conflict and have them on the edge of their seat. And then, oh, we bring them back. You know, it's yeah, I don't typically structure things, but I do recognize that good songs can be written that way, and good stories can be written that way. It's just never been my style. I write in a weird way that I'm sure other people write this way, but it's unlike anyone else I've ever met. It's not the most productive or best way to write. I write in a very fractured way where it's like I write one verse and then I just walk away from it. And then I'll just write a bunch of random things down for months. And I'm like, okay, this is good. This little chunk is good enough to put in a song. Let me flip through my binder or my pages. And oh, I was saying a similar thing. I was on a similar topic here. Let me piece this together. So I'm like crafting a puzzle kind of. That's my way of writing a song. How is it for you? Do you typically just sit down and
I'm like you. I'm a very slow writer. I don't typically crank things out in 5 minutes. Occasionally, I've had songs that came a lot quicker than others, like everybody. Um, but typically, I'm a little more methodical in that way. And it's really kind of an esoteric, like hippy dippy perspective. But I've really felt like since a lot of the tunes I write are relatively autobiographical, like I'll hit sort of a wall in the song, and you know it. You've got a verse, verse and a half, maybe you've got a good chorus, and it's just not quite coming beyond that. So I'll step back, and then it's almost as if inadvertently a couple months, like I'll have experienced something in my life that sort of is like, oh, that's what I was missing. I was missing this life experience, or I was missing this, if it's a song about heartbreak or it's a song about love, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but it really does feel like when I hit those walls, it seems like I just haven't lived it enough yet to get to that point. But I would ask you the question. One of my favorite tunes of yours is Two Hearts, which I think is just like a brilliant ballad. It's
appreciate it?
such a great story. It's really well told. It feels like it manages to balance, a traditional, folk or Western kind of story, but does it in a unique way. And so I would be curious, like when you were writing that tune, how much of it was pantsing it? How much of it did you know where it was going to go? And, where did the story come from for you?
Um, yeah, none of it was planned. It was totally, it's funny that analogy that I made about like, driving through the fog. I mean, it's totally like a car chase story. So it kind of fits for that. But yeah, none of it was planned. And that's part of the fun is just seeing like, oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? Like, um, okay, they got themselves in this situation. What the hell happens now? You know, but that was a song that um, I released that album in 2019, and that song was halfway written in 2016. So that was half of it was written in Maryland when I was living up there, and then the other half in like 2018 in Nashville. So I don't know where that stuff comes from. I would say a lot of it comes from just um a lot of it comes from a love of old westerns. Um there's this love that I have of characters that are kind of cocky, and that partially comes from old westerns, and that partially comes from listening to a lot of old blues from the 20s. A lot of those blues musicians are pretty cocky. There's a thing that I love, and I don't know like the technical terms for anything having to do with music. Um, but there's a thing that blues players do where they will, play the chorus and then maybe play the chorus like once or twice, and then they'll come to the chorus and they'll just do the instrumental of the chorus. It's kind of like you already know the lyrics. Why don't you sing it? Kind of thing,
Yeah.
Um, but one of my favorite blues musicians is Blind Willie McTell, and you listen to his music, it's just like there's cockiness all over the place. So yeah, just a love of storytelling, westerns, suspense. um I wrote that song Ballad of Brady on my first album, so I like to have at least one story song on an album. and I kind of wanted to up the ante. Um, and then the last thing I'll just say about Two Hearts is that, to me, one of the main things I wanted to do with storytelling in this last album was I didn't want to have violence. That was a big thing for me. Um, in my first album, someone gets shot, and I just kind of have said to myself for a while, in a peaceful society, in a peaceful world, violence can be entertainment. Violence is exotic, so it's interesting. Um, but in the world we live in now, it's too easy. Um, so in Two Hearts, a car gets shot. That's the most violent we get, but no one actually dies.
That's an interesting point. I really like that. And, one of the questions I was going to come in today with was asking you sort of what you think the role of the singer songwriter and specifically the folk singer is in social commentary and being socially relevant, because one of the things I've always appreciated about you, which I've said to you in text, is that you're really courageous in your willingness to explore social topics and be relevant and be potentially controversial. And it sounds like even at the level of not writing songs that are violent, because it is in a way a subversive approach to what is a violent culture, a hyper violent culture. So I did want to ask you that.
I think that um, when you write songs, a lot of people, when they write songs, they write for themselves, and I think that's the way it should be. I think you shouldn't write for a market, uh, but and I don't think you have any obligation to anybody to write a specific way or say specific things. But at the same time, I don't think um, you can write songs without being a product of your era, you know? So it's, even if you try to fight against it, it's going to come out. Um, and and I just want to speak my mind. Music is my outlet, so I just kind of say things that are on my mind. Um, but yeah, I don't feel an obligation, and that's definitely not why I write any of that stuff. Any of that stuff. Not that that's what you were saying or anything, but um, my background with music is I was listening to a lot of punk music in high school, and what attracted me to that music was people speaking out about things, and I traced that history of speaking out to folk music in the 60s, civil rights era stuff, and then back to the 20s with blues music. Um, so I've always really respected that history of speaking out, but I'm not trying to join that long lineage. What I'm trying to do is just use my freedom of speech. That's what it is. And if I fall into that tradition, that's great. Um, but people have so many ideas about genre and all these things like that. You're not folk, you have an electric guitar, blah 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 blah. I don't care. Be who the hell you are. If you feel um, outraged enough about what's going on in the world, why the hell have you not written a protest song? That's how I feel. That would be my question to everybody. I don't think you have to write a protest song, but with all that's going on, doesn't it say something if you haven't? I feel like I'm putting you on the spot, John. But I don't know. I'm fucking outraged, and I feel like if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention, right? So that's why I do that shit. I think it's not like winning me any fans, especially all these people who co-write all the time. They're writing. trying to write that next country hit, right? You don't write that hit by taking a side, right? You write it by writing a horoscope in song form, right? Something that's vague as hell. um I feel like I'm just ranting and rambling here.
Old man Josh.
Yeah, you spoke about protest, and now I'm protesting right here in our conversation.
No, I like it. No, it's really refreshing to hear that view. What I'm getting from it is sort of something inspiring, which is, be authentic to yourself. Really get to know who you are, and that includes the context of the society and the time that you live in, and to lean into it. It's going to look different for everybody.
I mean, how do you feel about it? Do you feel there's any obligation to an audience, or any obligation to an artist? Oh yeah, they before you answer that, sorry to jump in. The one other point that I wanted to make, um that I didn't say, was, I don't know, it's escaped my fucking mind now. Uh I don't feel there's an obligation to write anything, but I do feel that there's a responsibility. As soon as you, even if your audience is two people, there is a responsibility. So that goes back to the not putting violent music out there.
Yeah. And that's
So
what I was getting at. I think there is a responsibility, but I liked that the way you framed it was founded in the responsibility, first and foremost, to yourself. It is to be honest with who you are, to be willing to explore yourself and figure out what your views are, and figure out, what your fears are, and channel that into the music you're making, because that's the music and the art of substance, is that which, you know, can help people, and the fundamental responsibility is to helping yourself, and at least to me, because that's my outlet as well. But in doing that and in being honest, there's certain themes and there's certain, fears that you have to overcome in that vulnerability.
yeah.
Um, and
And I totally understand the fears. I totally get the fears of writing certain things and how will this be perceived and things like that. But um if you can't write certain things in the privacy of your own home, in a notebook that maybe nobody will ever see, then like what the hell? Like, I mean, where can you write it? Where is your freedom? I don't know. I mean, it is, writing songs is a therapy, right? And if you can't be completely open, where can you be open? And if you can't be open anywhere, what kind of a life is that? I don't know.
yeah, and I think that that touches on another important point, which is that it is okay to write songs just as a therapy. And that if no one ever hears it, that's okay. Because I think it's really easy to get caught up in, okay, this tune needs to go on the next record. And that's one of the things this year has helped me with, is that there's no immediacy to putting out another record because everything stopped. So it's allowed me to take a step back and say, what's the music I like to make? What's the stuff that's really on my heart? And put that out, like whether that's a garage band demo, whether that's scribbles in a notebook, like really just get it out, because that's really the ultimate point. And I guess what I would say, because I did feel put on the spot because you and I have had that conversation, which is like,
Right.
because I'm somebody who tends to avoid political songwriting, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I actually admire you and writers who are willing to like approach those subjects. But I also think that what I do, some of it is protest to me. It's the fact that I'm writing songs about recovery and songs about the heroin epidemic and needles in the schoolyard, and writing songs that I think are founded in sort of radical empathy and, love of the self and self-care. I think to me, coming where I came from and going through the things I've gone through, those are lessons that feel controversial uh, to where I came from, because it was not, not to pin it on anybody, but to love yourself was always a message to me of arrogance. Like, it's arrogant to care about yourself. It's arrogant to put yourself first. It's immodest to, say, I'm good at this. And so I think those are the messages that I need to hear. And in a sense, it feels a little bit Protestant, Protestant, I guess, but without any religious connotation. But at the same time, like that's a spectrum that's always going to be growth, because I am principled. I do have a lot of views on things like everybody. Um, but creation is always going to be trying to figure out where those barriers are that I've put up that said that's not something to talk about. That's not something you're allowed to say, and breaking those down because that's the role of art. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's a learning process.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different types of protesting, and there's probably some subjects that I wouldn't write about, primarily just because I don't feel like maybe I've experienced those things or have enough knowledge on them to speak on them, you know. Uh as far as like the political thing and speaking up for rights of people and things like that, I just feel like we're seeing right now such a wave from the other side, that we have to meet it in some way. And some people go out and march, and some people write songs, and some people make art and everything like that. But I think it's all necessary. Um, it just seems especially necessary now to state what side you're on, um, and to not be neutral. And that could come in a Facebook post. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to come in a song either. Um, of course, a Facebook post is kind of, we've curated our friend lists, so it's kind of preaching to the choir right there. But
Well, I get on Parlor and just
yeah,
nah, I have not, but
but yeah, I just need to be able to speak my mind, or I don't know. I have to be able to say stuff somewhere, or else I'll explode.
I believe it. I believe it. Yeah.
uh Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess, I mean, if you have a better transition than this, I was just going to say, but how do you keep yourself from getting sort of boxed in? Because for me, I think one of my reticence, or some of my hesitance comes from like the archetype of the protest folk singer. I think that's great, but I also think that I've seen artists that like that's what they became. Like they are the protest singer. And I think that can be great, but also, how do you I mean, I guess I could answer my own question from what you've already said, which is just the way that it's perceived, the way that it's classified is not what's important. It's not. But I would
I think if
question.
you I think if you put out an album like I did, like in 2019, and one of the songs is a protest song, then the protest song is one aspect of you as a songwriter, but you're not a protest songwriter. Like I'm not Phil Oakes and I'm not
Yeah,
Pete Seeger. You know what I mean? And Bob Dylan wasn't either of those,
yeah,
but he occasionally released songs like that. So I kind of see a protest singer as someone who releases full albums of protest songs. That's kind of
yeah.
how I see it.
And I guess I've taken the approach that you've taken because I do feel like it's a little bit more subtle, but I feel like on each of the records I put out, there's been at least one tune that I felt was pretty pointed
Hmm.
socially. On this one, I think it was kind of board game money, like was intended to be a commentary on sort of capitalism and sort of the nightmare that a lot of us have, are coming to terms with, which is just like, it feels like we're in late stage capitalism, and you know, it was supposed to be sort of a tongue in cheek, like, well, I guess someday we'll get to spend our monopoly money because the idea of owning a house, the idea of I was fortunate to get to go to school with the help of my parents, but like that's not the reality for a lot of us, you know. And Miss America was about that, and Needles in the Schoolyard was sort of about the opioid epidemic, and
Mhm.
you know, it's sort of, I do feel like I've taken that approach, but I do think that what you say is right in the sense that I've never gone a full record on what I would consider protest music.
Well, there's nothing wrong with doing it the way you're doing it. Um, it's just gonna it depends on the listener, you know what I mean? Like when you put something slightly veiled in a song, um, it's the people who are gonna get it are the ones who listen deeper and read the lyric sheet and pay attention, you know, and then other people are just gonna listen to the melody and let it drift over their head. I've also seen artists release songs where they thought they had a clever metaphor or something like that, or they thought everybody would get it, and people didn't get it and took it the wrong way. So that's also why I wrote like Darkest Before the Dawn in a very blunt way, because I wanted to write it in a way that could not be misconstrued at all. Like, this is what I mean. Um, so it depends on what you're saying, but if you're saying stuff that's really serious shit, I think you got to be as blunt as possible to not be misinterpreted. But
Sure.
that's my, I don't want to be misinterpreted. Some people may like that. I don't know. So when did you, let's go into the early days. When did you first start playing music and what was your first instrument?
I started playing music in fourth grade. I picked up an alto saxophone.
There
But
you
I,
go.
yeah, I really did it.
Trumpet for me.
Oh, there we are. See, and I was not
We could
very good
start a
at it.
mariachi band right here.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I was never very good at it, but I joined it because I went to a small grade school and high school, and all my friends were in band, and it seemed like a cool thing to do. So I played alto for. I played it all through high school, but I had been playing alto for about 4 years when I picked up a guitar for the first time. I was 13, wanted to play baseball, wasn't good at baseball, got cut from the eighth grade tryouts, and that evening was at a Borders bookstore and convinced my parents to buy me a Beatles greatest hits because I thought, oh, I've heard the name, let's listen. And then I listened and needed a guitar, and that was really at 13 the moment when music took off for me as a passion thing. But what about you?
Yeah, third grade trumpet. Didn't stick with that for too long. And then nothing until I was like 16. Wanted a guitar, asked my parents for a guitar for like Christmas, and asked for an acoustic, got a classical. Um, and yeah, just I was kind of writing poetry around that time. So it was more poetry and just kind of messing with the guitar, playing a lot of teaching myself playing a lot of single string stuff, just like sliding up and down the string, um, like a stripper. And no, were you kind of writing immediately, or were you just trying to learn covers when you started writing stuff, or?
Well, it was similar to you. My dad is an attorney, but you know, he was a drama major in his undergrad. So I was always raised on poetry and sort of theater, and you know, I said that in such a pretentious way, theater. But
Theater.
you know, so I grew up, you know, reading Poe and reading Yeats and Robert Burns, and you know, really loving to write, you know, verse, and then started playing guitar. And then at some point, pretty quickly thereafter, it kind of came together, where I was like, oh, well, actually, I think the first song I ever wrote, I was playing this grade school talent show, and we were going to do Proud Mary, and we were awful. I mean, we were really, really terrible. We'd been playing our instruments for like 3 weeks at this point and threw our names in. And then like the day before, they said, "Oh well, it can't be Proud Mary because it has to be songs that are about like character celebration and generosity and stuff." So like I quickly rewrote the lyrics to Proud Mary to be about our school and just like went for it. And I mean, by today's standards, it was not anything to write home about. But, I think those were the moments when it was like, wait, I can do this, and,
It's
from,
pretty gutsy.
yeah, we
Pretty
just,
gutsy because if I'm gonna screw up in a show, like when I'm playing a song, 90% of the time it's because I've written the lyrics or I've memorized the lyrics when I was writing the song in one way and then changed them to other lyrics. And then my brain is like, this word or this word, this word or this word, you know.
yeah,
So it's totally not an easy thing always to when you learn a song one way and then you try to switch it up.
yeah. I mean, at that point, I think we were also inexperienced. And, I was singing in a low register at that time. And like, we didn't have it mixed at all. So I don't even know that you could hear me. But and it's another one of those things that like I started singing because I was the only one in the band that would do it. It
Mhm.
was like no one else wanted to sing, I'll sing. And it just worked out that I had an ear enough for it that I developed myself as a singer. But it's just a lot of that kind of inadvertent, it happens because it happens. It wasn't like I set out to be that. And I think you'd probably say something similar in the sense that like at some point you're listening to the Beatles, you're listening to, Zeppelin, you're listening to the Stones, you're listening, all the greats. You're going to find Bob Dylan, you're going to find Paul Simon, you're going to find Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, and whatever it was when I did get those records, that those were what set me on fire. Like I feel like I went through some different periods, but it was like, oh, here I found the Tom Petty greatest hits, like Game Changer, and so those were the moments when suddenly like the poet in me and the guitar player in me were like, that's what I want to do. I want to be the storyteller. I don't want to be the lead player necessarily, but
I
I don't.
think in a way, that music is more folk music is more accessible for sure. You hear some badass rock band from the 60s or 70s, you're like, I can't do that on guitar.
Yeah.
And then you hear like Dylan, and you're like, okay, maybe he's a little bit better than me, but like he's playing an acoustic guitar, I'm playing an acoustic guitar,
Sure.
so yeah. And then a lot of the things, we mentioned like Phil Oakes earlier, like he's got an amazing voice. You talk about someone like James Taylor. These people have like amazing voices, but for the most part, a lot of singers, what attracted me was the lyrics, and the lyrics could be the focus. It didn't have to be, I didn't have to be some classically trained um, singer. And in a way, the delivery of the lyrics is more real, um, because it's not perfectly sung.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what appealed to me.
And I think, to a large extent, that's the heart of folk music is that it's music for the people by the people. That's
Mhm.
kind of, and there's been various genres that took that on, like punk took that on, where it really was grunge in a big way took that on, you know, but that spirit, that sort of art for art's sake, this is what I have to say, and I'm going to say it in a way that's distinctly my own versus necessarily something that's classically trained is really the spirit.
And I was talking about that the other day. Talking about accessible music and accessible instruments and things like that. Because I played on a live stream, Darkest Before the Dawn, and there's that whistling part, and I was talking about how whistling is like one of my favorite instruments. I'm not like amazing at it. I'm okay at it, but it's one of my favorite instruments because everyone has it. Not everyone can do it, but everyone has it. It's it doesn't cost any money, and yeah, it's there's something so humble and so beautiful about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I
and
love that. It's
The idea of your own body being an instrument is just kind of, it's crazy
yeah, when it
when you
brings
think
me
about it.
back to like Sun House, like just kind of the claps and the stomps and the way
Hmm.
that that was implemented in blues. Like, those were moments in music when it was absolutely telling a reality of a human condition. It was classist in many ways. I mean, those were race records at that time. You look at the Carter family and it's like, Maybell's guitar, like that changed literally everything. Like that's a Sears catalog that they saved up forever to buy this guitar. And like, or Hendrix, he learns on a one stringed pawn shop guitar. It was, their passion used the resources they had. And in many ways, the great artists are the greatest were the ones that, were born into the need for music to be an outlet, for music to be a representation of the soul, and it's really an incredible thing.
That's why whenever I'm listening to a new artist, I always want to go back to their first album when they were the hungriest.
But
I
yeah,
don't want to hear about the guy who thought he was good for 8 albums and then his ninth album was actually good. I want to, I
yeah.
want to hear the guy with his acoustic guitar before he learned about all these tricks in the studio and the 15 pedals and it was all about the songwriting and the passion.
I've always been much more that kind of person too. I'd rather hear the great artist with just an acoustic guitar where they're not hiding behind anything. And that's not, there's nothing wrong with the full band stuff. I think that's badass too. But, there's just something magical about those moments.
I think you were like me during the start of the pandemic and maybe even up till now, you kind of just like weren't really writing stuff, right? I mean, you kind of just taking a break.
Yeah,
Have you been writing new stuff now? Or are you?
I've been dabbling more. I definitely have some tunes. I definitely know where I want to go with this next record. I would say that's about half finished as far as the tunes. Um, but I'm just, taking a step back and like because I have this space, I'm starting to be more like, well, here's four tunes that I've written for this next record, but I've had them for a while. Maybe I'm not as excited about them as I was. How about I just take a step back and just keep writing and then pick from there? Um, but I have definitely been coming back to it and getting little verses here and there and which is typically how it goes for me. Once I put a record out, I kind of have like three or four songs that carry over into the next project and then I have like a blank space where I kind
Mhm.
of am like taking a step back, figuring out where I'm at, figuring out what I want to say. But the one thing I would say that's interesting is with Mortal Flames, like when the pandemic hit, you and I both had pretty big plans as far as going to the Netherlands and like doing the Europe thing. And so I didn't feel like that was quite finished. Um, and so now there's sort of this like, that's the end of it, is what it feels like. Now it's time for a new project. And it's
You
been
gonna change
tough.
your name?
Yeah, maybe I'll change my name, but it's been tough because I never anticipated the fact that having written a concept record before with Mortal Flames, that it's really difficult to go back to not writing concept records. Like, because I've spent so much time thinking about the big picture of that album, like this next record, I'm like, well, what's the big picture of this record? And it's been hard to like step back and say they don't all have to be a larger narrative, but
They don't
I,
have to be, but typically when you write an album within 2 to 3 years, similar things are on your mind. The songs are typically going to go together.
yeah,
I've got songs that are older where maybe I was at a similar technical proficiency, but they don't sound like they would fit together. How do you come up with melodies? Like, does something? I mean, one thing I've always been jealous of with you is your finger picking. I can't. Not that I've really put much work into it, I can say, but but it's something that I've always like wished I could do. Um, does like a melody pop into your head and you try to replicate that on guitar, or is it just kind of like noodling on the guitar and you kind of like stumble across something, or?
It's more noodling. I mean, as far as guitar parts go,
Mhm.
I kind of just am playing around. I stole a page from Joni Mitchell's book in the sense that she would like get up, just tune the guitar to something random and just play. I mean, and I've never been a huge alternate tunings person, but
That's why you don't play with bands much, because they would
yeah,
hate you.
yeah, and it's funny. I mean, in writing the way that I do, just because I've been doing the solo thing, like a lot of my tunes are a lot more complex than they sound, and they really shouldn't be. I mean, like Walls Fall Down is in seven, like, and that was just because I was sitting on a bed with an acoustic, and that's how it felt. But it's just, I mean, my melodic content on guitar is generally noodling and kind of just knowing what you can add to a chord to mix it up. But I will say that moving forward, I've really been more intentional about experimenting with jazz harmonies and like really coloring it in a different way, which I thought there was moments of in like Orpheus and those tunes, but I've really like what I've been kind of exhausting is the Joni Mitchell discography the last 5 months. She's an artist I've always respected, but it never quite clicked with me. And I would say that over this pandemic, it has been clicking in a different way. And I think inevitably, whatever you're listening to is going to be coming out in what you're writing. And so I just think that's kind of been where it's coming from for me. And that, it's going to be a poor imitation of her, but it'll still be me very much inspired by her.
I mean, nobody can be her.
No, and
She's
she's
extremely unique. Um, the playing, the singing, it's almost like a bird fluttering
it's
around.
it's
It's
incredible.
yeah,
Well, and I think for her, I'm not an expert, but she's a visual artist. So I really think that a lot of the way she approached things was from that perspective. It really, to me, feels like this like weaving of colorful harmonies and sort of playful melody, and she's legendary. She's one of the all-time greats for sure. And I've been a little more intentional about trying to learn from her, I guess is what I would say. But
that's really cool.
what about you? What's the new electric album? Where's that coming from?
Well, you were with me when I bought that expensive new amp
Yes.
um before the pandemic. So I've got to put it to use. Um I've just got a few songs now that feel more like rock songs, and I want to see where that goes. I want to experiment with that. Um and I kind of want to take kind of a little bit of a punk approach to it and not really agonize for 20 years about like tone and all kinds of stuff. I want it to sound good, but I'm not going to buy 500 pedals. And I'm sure once I get in the studio, like they'll have gear for me that I can, mess with. But yeah, uh, I want to do something different. So it's going to be, it's like the fog in front of the car. I don't know where it's going to go with the album. I started a Patreon. I'm really excited about that. It's I've been working full time my whole life and then trying to fit music in, and now I'm trying to. I've been I've changed the way I live. I am spending like obviously like a lot of people. I'm not going out and getting food out and buying coffee out all the time and stuff like that. So save a lot of money that way. And uh, so I've kind of realized like I can afford to make less and focus more on what I actually care about. So, which is music. So that's the goal with that. Lots of behind the scenes content. Going to be sharing songs that predate my debut EP. Um, going to be going deep into lyrics and references that some people may not have gotten, and where I was when I wrote lyrics and what inspired them. Um, so that's my big thing recently. But yeah, I've been writing new stuff, arranging with the band as much as we can. It's kind of weird through Zoom
Yeah,
and all that. We're figuring it out.
sure.
Um,
That's awesome.
one cool thing is it's with this whole Zoom thing, we have to my bandmates have to send files, you know, and we mix it all together and everything like that. So I've got all these like different versions of band demos, and that's all going to be released on the Patreon.
That's really
So
cool.
I really believe in not um, holding things back from the fans who want more, you know? So um, for a lot of artists, it's all about a brand. And like, I don't want to put myself out there unless I'm putting my perfectly polished song out there. But, you know, when I write a song, I want to share it with the people who are the most interested in that song and see how they respond to it.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, one thing I've said in the past is if I put out a song, there's got to be some people out there who like it. And that may sound a little cocky, but what it really is if something can make it through the gauntlet of my mind and come out on the other side and survive, then there's got to be at least, you know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people who like it. So yeah, because I am my own worst critic. I
Oh,
think a
I
lot of
hear
us
that.
are.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that's true. I think it's a matter of finding that group. But when you do find it, which I think that you are gradually finding it, we all kind of are, um, it's good because those are going to be the people who are willing to allow you to experiment and allow you to, do what you need to do. And that's been one of the blessings, I think, of the modern age with the internet and, the way in which people can be reached on, I it's both sad and exciting to say that my music is being played more in Brazil and Turkey than it is here on Spotify, and it's like it.
You've got an escape hatch when this country burns down.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were still planning on the Netherlands. Hopefully, that happens at some point. But it's just, but that to say, like, it's cool that we're in a time where that's possible. I mean, to if I can step back and be like, you know what, 20 people in Turkey listen to my song today. Like that's pretty cool. Like
That's pretty cool.
just to be able to say that. And we all can. You get on your Spotify and see and it's neat, like wow, my music's being played in South Africa, anywhere like that. It's sick.
Yeah,
And
it's amazing. It's wonderful and horrible.
yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
What I mean by horrible is I hate Spotify. It's the worst thing ever. It shares our music with so many people, which is wonderful, and people anywhere can listen to it, but they're a criminal organization
Yeah, I
and they
mean,
make money off the backs of artists and pay people nothing, and it's criminal.
I I'm right there with you. Growing up, it was always modesty is the best policy. Like, be modest, sell yourself short. But at the end of the day, if you don't appear to believe in yourself, why should anybody else? If you don't
It's
care
true.
or
It's
you
true.
don't, and you might care a lot. You probably do. It's just if you don't present that care and that passion, then it's going to be a hard sell.
Can you be modest and be an artist? To put stuff out, do you not have to believe in yourself to some extent? I think I didn't believe in myself for a long time, for many years, and that's why I didn't get up on stage until I was a lot older. Or I think I was realistic with it though. I think I didn't get on until I felt like I was ready. But some people will use that as an excuse to like never do the thing that they want to do.
I mean, I think it's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't rule out that there's people out there that just want to make a record and they want their family to hear it. But I think if you're intending to do it at all professionally and make money on it, there has got to be an inherent belief, even
An
if
ego.
yeah, it has to be,
There's got to be a fucking ego even moving to fucking Nashville.
yeah, I mean, there's even if it's deep, deep down, like it's the egomaniac with an inferiority complex thing, where like I just anybody, I cannot imagine that there's a single person ever that hasn't put out a record that deep down somewhere didn't think maybe this is it, maybe this is the one. Like every record I've ever put out, no matter how much I talk about it or don't talk about it, there's a part of me that's saying, I think this is great. I think this is going to be the thing,
Yeah.
and I think that's okay. I think everybody feels that way though. I think you can learn to temper that. I've definitely I'm less delusional than I was on record one, but I still put them out with the hope that they're going to take off.
But it could be the thing.
It could
There's a
be.
million factors,
Yeah.
Someone could come back 10 years later and be like, oh, this is the thing now. Maybe we weren't ready for this. Or this wasn't country. Now it is country. Or, just there's, or maybe you released an amazing album and like me, you put all the money into the album and didn't have money left over to hire a publicist for $5,000, $6,000, so then it got heard by a decent number of people, but not everyone. It didn't get through those locked doors, so
I think, I mean, what that comes down to for me is it calls on two things. And one of them is to keep making records, like just keep doing it. And it really, for me, is much more of a snowball effect than anything else. And two, make good records. So, like, the benefit I think you and I have, and this is my ego talking, is we've put out good records and they're always going to be good records. So, maybe 3 records from now, it starts to take off and you have a fan base. Well, all those old records are still going to be good records that they haven't heard yet. So it's still
exactly.
going to be new content.
You're building a library.
Yeah. And so just make good records that are true to you and keep making them.
Yeah.
And I believe that, that's all you can do, really.
Yeah. But just make albums for yourself, really. Sit in your bedroom, make albums for yourself, and then spend 25 grand in the studio and record it.
Yeah.
The music business. But we were going to pick each other's songs and like play a song, and maybe we'll do that at the end of this thing. I'll just tack them on the end here, and then people will get to listen to them. You mentioned Walls Fall Down, and that was going to be my choice for a couple of reasons. One, I just really love the melody on that.
Thank you.
And I think it's got a really strong chorus. I like that. And also you recorded a really cool video for it, which we can't typically afford to do, right? I mean, either we've got to have friends who record things and edit things, or got to have some extra money somehow. But it's expensive.
And that one was recorded by Brian Clark, the producer.
Okay.
So it was,
there you go.
There you go.
It came out really good.
Thanks. I was proud of it. The bowling thing was quirky, but it kind of works. But
it works, yeah. Especially, I think the like the black and white was a good choice.
Yeah.
Where was that recorded again?
Pinewood Social in Nashville.
Okay.
They let us, at the cost of renting the lane, we were able to record it, and it was great. Support Pinewood Social, everybody, because they're good people. But yeah, Walls Fall Down. It's one of my tunes that I always go back to. It's kind of one of my favorites that I've written, and it's interestingly not one that I think is necessarily typical of me, in the sense that it's really pretty simple. The lyrics are not very complicated. It's kind of a direct love song.
It's not overly wordy.
Yeah, and that's the trap I fall into. I tend to be someone who really overthinks it, and it becomes complex, and that can be a cool thing, but there's a real beauty in the simple songs and just being able to say it in a way that's direct and honest. And that particular tune was probably the quickest song I've ever written.
That's awesome.
I probably wrote Walls in about 30 minutes, because it was Actually, what happened was I was seeing a girl at that time back in Illinois. I was still living here, but I would go
Let
back.
me break in and lecture you, John. Stop moving stuff on your desk. It's like picking
Oh,
up on the mic.
okay, sorry, guys. Um,
All right,
yeah.
resume.
So that tune was written because I was back in Illinois. I would go back relatively frequently, and I was seeing a girl back there, and I'd go hang out with her. But then like the night would end, and it would be time for me to go home, and I could just kind of see it on her face that like there all of a sudden like no matter how close we'd gotten over those last few hours, no matter how strong our relationship felt, like the doubts start to creep in because suddenly it's like, is this goodbye? You know, and I did the same thing. And so I just remember one particular night I left and like I was really feeling that sort of guilt for having left her and, you know, sadness for the fact that she like was worried about our future and all that. And I just kind of sat on my bed and like that guitar melody just sort of came out. Um, and
So when was that written? Like what year was that written?
that would have been written 2016 probably.
Okay, and then it came out like 2017.
Yeah. Uh, so I mean, yeah, it would have to be late 2015, early to mid 2016 would have been when it was written.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, and it just was a tune that like I was really feeling in that moment, and I sat down and that the melody sort of came. I know earlier you asked about guitar melodies and where they come from for me, and like almost always they come from some form of a D chord. Uh,
Okay.
so like that is a droning D note with capo on three. So
Hmm.
it's an F, but it's really a D shape. And so I was just playing on that little thing and it worked. And then the chorus and the verses were just really what I was feeling in that 30 minutes at 1 in the morning after having
That's when the
driven
best
home.
songs come.
Yeah, I was too tired to overthink it. You know, it just was what I was feeling.
I mean, you talk about walls falling down. There is a mental wall, you know, that most of us have. Um, and that wall says, like, when you think of a lyric, right? A lyric pops in your head, you're like, oh, this is pretty good. Then it hits the wall, and the wall's like, that's shit. Don't even write that down. Like that will happen. But that wall gets lowered, I find, at least personally, the more tired I am. Some people lower it, I think, with drugs. People achieve it in different ways, but you got to lower that wall, um, and sleep on it and come back to it and be like, hey, maybe that wasn't that bad, or that's pretty good. Maybe it just needs a little tweaking, whatever. Um, but that's one of the, I think one of that's one of the greatest skills of Dylan, um, because he is so goofy with some of his lyrics, and he doesn't have that wall, or didn't when he was writing some of these things. And he decided to just keep some of these ridiculous lyrics like all the way into the recording studio, like through the release process, like everything. Just so that's one of his skills. And but the thing is, you can write things that are goofy and have people listen to them and have them be like, that's goofy, but I still love it, if you deliver it with enough conviction.
And I,
So
you know, at the end of the day, like the more I've been doing is the more that I've seen like, oh, I'm going to write a song that I think's kind of the hit. And I've always been honest with myself, but you know, there's sort of that like, oh, this tune, like it's in that direction. This is the radio song, like that kind of thing. And like, it almost never works out that way. And so the longer I've done it, the more I'm like, if it works for me, it works, you know, like, because I'm a harsh critic, like you said.
yeah,
Like, if it gets past me and I'm okay with it and it's goofy and someone might not understand it, I'm okay with it, you know, because it's not crap. It's not like I spewed it out. I wanted to ask about your song "All Out War." That's, I think, my favorite.
All Out
I
War.
I really adore that song.
I appreciate it.
I think it's clever. I think it's tender. I think it's really a showstopper every time you play it. For me.
Thank you. What do you want to know about it?
Well, I guess it sort of reminds me of "Ease Your Pain," which is like my other favorite tune from that record, the other record.
Awesome.
And I don't know. I just feel like with "All Out War," what I think of is Josh Gray, like, the upbeat, sort of the rockin' tunes, like really clever interplay. It's similar to the Walls Fall Down thing. Like All Out War feels extremely simple, straight, and just really a gorgeous tune. And I just was curious where that came from.
Heartbreak and pain.
Yeah.
um, I think what I was trying to do was write like somewhat of a country song, you know. So that's where, like you said, I've written all these songs where they're very where they're faster, more upbeat, and I kind of wanted to slow it down a bit, um, and see what I could get away with and still hold people's attention. Um, the focus for me um was lyrics. Obviously, I wanted to write something um poetic, like Heart Like an Ocean from my previous album. um so I just really focused on the poetry. That's what it was all about. Just delivering that poetry uh in a slow way where everybody got the where it really sunk in, you know. uh One of my more popular songs is um Mortality Blues, and I've always felt it's a tricky song to play because it's kind of a percussive, upbeat kind of thing, but I'm singing about death. So I don't want to play it too fast, but you kind of inevitably have to like kind of, you know. So I wanted something where the music kind of fit the somber mood of the song a bit more.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
I think you nailed it. I love that song.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
It really has kind of your trademark quiet intensity. Like it's not overstated, but it really is a huge statement. Like I, I'm
Betrayal.
I'm jealous of that tune. Like Love Ain't a
I
Battle,
appreciate
it's
it,
an all
man.
out war. I'm like, shit. Like,
Easier Pain was people are going to get tired of watching me wipe my nose on here. That's my new song. It's going to be called Wipe Your Nose
love it.
and Wash Your Hands. Uh, yeah, these allergies are killing me. Ease Your Pain was heavily influenced by um, Your Long Journey. I've seen it written Your Long Journey or Your Lone Journey. I think it's Your Long Journey. And that is a song that was written by Doc Watson's wife.
Hmm.
And it's a religious song about how basically um, the the wife is singing to the husband who is on his deathbed passing away, um, that they will meet again um, in the kingdom of heaven. And it's one of the saddest songs I've ever heard.
Sounds like it.
But I love it. I love it. It's so damn good. And there's this guy Sam Amadon who takes like old songs and does these amazing covers of them, and he did a version of that. So that's where I first heard that. Uh, but I wanted to write something similar, but from the other perspectives. The person who's passing away singing to their loved ones, like "Don't worry about missing me." So, uh, So yeah, that was the goal with that one.
Well, you nailed it on that one too. That one
I
always
appreciate it,
crushes
man.
me. Like I'm a
I appreciate
sucker
it.
for the ballads, but those two I think you just knock out of the park, and you knock them all out of the park. But like those two, every time you play them, I'm like, yep.
Appreciate it, man. And I especially appreciate it because, like I said, you're really good with finger picking, and I've got my very basic like like but for me it's all about the lyrics. So the guitar is the canvas. Um so
For sure.
and one thing I did on the Patreon was um people can get a download of the instrumental version of Songs of the Highway,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
has never been released. And the one song that's not on there, unfortunately, is Ease Your Pain, because Ease Your Pain we did completely live. So there is no instrumental version.
I think you told me that. I think you told
Yeah.
me how that one went down.
Yeah.
It's
What you can get, the other thing you can download on the Patreon, I'm just plugging my Patreon here, is you can get the lossless versions of the different albums. And I think it's really cool to listen to Ease Your Pain that way because um yeah, it was me and our bass player Julio and a pedal steel player, and we were like kind of just like sitting in this room, and we had mics on us, but then we had a big room mic above us because we really wanted to just get that sound. There's parts where you can hear people creaking in their chairs a little bit and stuff like that. It just kind of adds to that sound. That's something I really want to experiment with in maybe this next album, just alternate ways of recording, um and I was talking with my drummer about that. One of the people who's really nailed that is Tom Waits.
Yeah, for
um
sure.
the just getting that room sound in there, and making it feel like you're right there in the room. That's something that's amazing to me. um
Yeah,
and I think it's something that we could all use from recordings in this time when we can't even come within 6 feet of each other.
that's true.
To listen to a recording and feel like you're in the room would be a good thing. But yeah, man, it's been good catching up with you. I think I'm gonna play Walls Fall Down at the end here.
Sweet. Works for me.
People can check that out. And yeah, maybe I'll throw All Out War on the end there.
Yeah, do it.
And I can see it in your eyes, the pain your smile tries to hide, how every kiss is laced with doubt, and every wish you trample out. And I know when you watch me go, the memories come from below, of how it always used to be, when love felt just like slavery. And come on, darling, let your walls fall down. Yesterday ain't here and now. You can't be free when the past surrounds you. Come on, darling, let your walls fall down. And I know that your heart it breaks, that I look like the same mistake, even when I swear I'm true, the other boys all said that too. What didn't kill you made you sad, and sometimes you still wish it had. But darling girl, you ain't dead yet, so why not try to live again? And come on darling, let your walls fall down. Happiness could still be found. It's hard to see it when the past surrounds you. Come on darling, let your walls fall down. Promise anything of what tomorrow's face will bring, but I'd never hurt you purposely, and today feels just like destiny. So come on darling, let your walls fall down. Yesterday ain't here and now. You can't be free when the past surrounds you. Come on darling, let your walls fall down. Well, come on darling, let your walls fall down. Happiness could still be found. It's hard to see it when the past surrounds you. Come on darling, let your walls fall down.
I can feel the heat on this Texas street, burning holes in the soles of my shoes. Surrounded by men in dark and tense, communing with bottles of booze. There's a picture of you at 22 in the breast pocket of my coat. I turn it over when I'm not sober and shed tears to the words you wrote. I said, open your eyes, raise your fist, show me that we're worth more than this. I know it ain't easy, but it's worth fighting for. Love ain't a battle, it's an all-out war. An all-out war. This old guitar carries the scars of 1,000 barroom nights. My fingers, they trace the lines on her face as she sings neath the fluorescent lights. I cradle each word like a newborn bird falling from the nest. I was too blind to see you had to be free, or else be laid to rest. I said, open your eyes, raise your veil, show me that we're worth more than this. I know it ain't easy, but it's worth fighting for. Love ain't a battle, it's an all-out war. An all-out war. Been chasing my breath since the day you left 12 long years ago. It's the snap of the bone as the blade finds its home where loved ones flourished and flowed. I've known the sacrifice of a reclusive vice, though many an angel is tried. If you asked me today, I'd just have to say, I guess that I'm doing alright. I said, open your eyes, raise your veil, show me that we're worth more than this. I know it ain't easy, but it's worth fighting for. Love ain't a battle, it's an all-out war. I said, open your eyes, raise your veil, show me that we're worth more than this. I know